Give him his background and then go into the presentation. I have been in the NHD industry for about 19 years doing just NHD, doing trainings, educating, providing great information, also providing classes and bringing in excellent speakers like our land survey and due diligence people. We're also doing a social media later on this year. And the reason why natural hazard disclosures are required, because 1103 of the Civil Code back in June of 1998 required 1 to 4 unit, all real estate residential properties must have a natural hazard disclosure, and then they later added the tax report. So both of those things are required, and a natural hazard disclosure is required in some form on all real estate transactions in California, including commercial industrial requires just the NHD, the co-ops and mobile homes just require an NHD, but all other properties are considered residential and they must have a NHD and tax. Okay, and now I'm going to give it to Eric.
Good morning. My name is Eric Spitz. I've been in the business since 1994. I used to own a company called LGS Reports. Of course, in 2005, I sold the company to First American Title. And about 3 years ago, I said, oh my God, my non-compete's coming up. There's a better way to do these reports. So I started my NHD disclosure reports. A little history, just to add on what John was saying, and I hope John can keep pushing me because he's very well versed in a lot of the subjects we're talking about. So if I miss something, please just step right in, Johnny. Remember, these disclosures, I mean, we've been doing this since 1994. These disclosures have always needed to be made by the seller to the buyer. And the seller and the agent would put, if you remember, on the CAR forms, they would answer those questions. Are we in an earthquake fault zone? Are we in a flood zone? And everyone put, I don't know, no we're not. And because of that, because there were lawsuits, that's where this natural hazard disclosure industry really sprang up. More like we would do the work, everybody gets the protection. So you're putting the liability on a third party to do the work. We do the work, you get the protection. And that's the name of the game. So in 1998, even though we were doing these reports in 94, in 1998, the standard format came out by the state, which is that natural hazard disclosure statement, which is the 6 disclosures that we're talking about. You know, your earthquake, flood zones, fire zones, seismic hazard zones, liquefaction, landslide. You know, there's 6 of those disclosures. But as you look on all the reports, there are many, many, many more disclosures than just the 6. Of course, they've added the tax that are required. There are so many advisories that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So the basic minimum is those 6 disclosures on the natural hazard disclosure statement. But there are so many other disclosures that are required by civil code to be made. We do the reports. John and I, our companies, take care of these. We do the work. You get the protection. We take the liability off you, off the seller, and put it on it, and we back it up with insurance. I think you guys carry 10 million E&O, is that right? We carry the same, 10 million E&O, covering all parties in the transaction. Okay? That's how this whole disclosure industry started. That's how I got in the business. A little more history for me. I started actually in the industry in '87, where my company, LGS Retrofitters, was doing all the retrofitting that was required in the city of LA. Gas shutoff valves, smoke detectors, watering strapping, low flush toilets, everything that was required when a property sold. And then in '94, a couple of escrow officers, a couple of agents showed me a report. And they said, you should get into this. They're starting to make us order these reports. I built a team of geologists. We started producing these orders. And then, of course, '98 became a state law and just kept growing from there. So that's kind of our history. So as we spoke about, you know, the required form is really just that natural hazard disclosure statement. And the important person to sign it, of all the people to sign it, I know there's a place for the agents to sign, there's a place for the seller to sign, but the real important person to sign is the buyer. Because once the buyer receives this report, they have 3 days right of rescission to get out of the deal. So the sooner you can order the report in the transaction, the sooner you get rid of that 3-day right of rescission. Remember, once the buyer has the report, if for any reason they want out of this deal, they can use anything on this report to get out of that deal, and they have 3 days to do it. So the fact of the matter is, if they're not in a flood zone and they wish they were in a flood zone, they can say, I want to be in a flood zone. I'm out of this deal. They can do that. They can do that. So the sooner in the transaction you get this report to your customer, to the buyer, the sooner you get rid of that 3-day right of rescissions. Once that 72 hours is up, they can no longer use this report as a way out. That's how important it is. So the earlier you order it, you can order it before you get into escrow and have it for the prospective buyers. You can order it as soon as you get into escrow. We see too often that they're ordered at the end of escrow, right? Because you want to get rid of it. You don't want to make this report as a way out of the deal. Okay? You want to go on? Let's talk about the 6. Okay. Well, I can talk about the 6.
Go into the 6 that you
Let me start the 6.
I could do it, but
Let's talk about the 6 disclosures. The 6 that we're talking about, the 6 natural hazard disclosures that were on the basic format, on the basic NHD, are of course the FEMA flood zones, which if you are in an A zone or V zone, which is the 100-year flooding, which the chance for a flood within 100 years, then you're in a flood zone. Now something very interesting about these flood zones is, say this piece of paper here. I'm going to put this down for a second. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. If any part of the property is touching the parcel, any part of the parcel, say this thing is the parcel of property, if any part of the flood zone is touching it, right here even, right here, just along the bottom, if any part of the parcel touches a flood zone, our report will say you're in a flood zone. Now the reality is you may not be in that flood zone, but our report is going to say yes, you are in. Now I know with our company, we actually go through a second check. We will pull a flood cert for you and actually give you the actual determination and show you the maps saying, okay, our report says you're in a flood zone because some of the parcel lands are touching the flood zone. But the reality is we will send you the flood cert, the FEMA flood cert, and say, here's your flood cert, you're not in because only part of the parcel is touching it. So our still report says yes, you are in, but you are not in. You will not have to pay flood insurance. The FEMA flood cert is the final determination, always will be. Okay, it's just a proactive thing that our company does. Okay, that's the FEMA flood zone. There's the fire zones, high fire severity zones, and state fire responsibility zones, of course. If you're in a big wildfire area, you're going to get the high fire severity zones. If you're in, you're in. It may require that you pay an extra fee to the local municipality through your taxes. $150 maybe, $50 maybe, depends on what they need to help fight the fires. State fire responsibility areas are areas in the county areas that the state is responsible for. Okay? That's where the state will be responsible for. It's not the responsible of the local municipalities, the city municipalities, but rather the state is responsible for it. An example of a state fire responsibility area may be some of the Santa Monica Mountains. Okay? Where it's not in a specific city, it's in the county lines. You have county lines around here, like the borders of San Gabriel, Arcadia. There's some county lines there. The cities may not be responsible for that little county line area. It might be for the county, the state to be responsible for. Let's see here. Active faults. We're talking about, of course, the largest, the Aquas-Carrillo earthquake fault zone. Big fault zone. We must disclose in the reports whether the property is in the fault zone or not in the fault zone. Keep in mind that if you're near the fault zone, if you're 2 miles away, our report will not show that you're in the fault zone. But during an earthquake, you're going to shake pretty hard. Remember the Northridge quake? That was all the way in Northridge. It wasn't even on the Aquas-Carrillo earthquake fault. Everybody shook really hard, plenty of damage going on. But the reality is, these are the ones identified by the state that the seller must inform the buyer on. Of course, if there are any other disclosures that the seller knows about the property, any other issues about the property, the seller must disclose those to the buyer as well. Liquefaction, landslide zones, dam inundation areas. There can be a reservoir 5 miles away, and the state and the federal government and the counties have actually mapped out little rivers from these big reservoirs if they should break, if a dam should break, if they should break for any reason. So they will actually go through. And sometimes, why are we in a dam inundation zone? Why are we in a dam zone? There's no dam near us. It might be 5 miles away. The fact of the matter is the state has looked at everything right to the ground level and has seen the little arteries and capillaries that may continue going through, and that's it. But we're happy to provide maps to show where the property is in relation to any of these, and identify the dam or the reservoir if need be as well. Liquefaction. Liquefaction is, and there's a lot of areas that have liquefaction in it. Around here, usually at the base of mountains, of course all the beaches. Liquefaction, when there's a quake, when there's shaking in the ground, it's kind of like a quicksand effect. So if a property is in a liquefaction area, when shaking starts, it may start settling a little, and when the shaking stops, that's where the house ends up. But keep in mind, even during the Northridge quake, most of the San Fernando Valley, right near the base of the mountains, is in a liquefaction area. There was no liquefaction, no damage attributable to liquefiable areas during that time. But you see it, the best example is during the, at the beach. All the coastlines are pretty much a liquefiable area. Johnny, you want to continue on with some of the other disclosures?
Well, liquefaction, what he's talking about, he's a little bit incorrect because all the San Fernando Valley from Burbank north to Rinaldi is in a liquefiable area. And basically what that is that you have to have a very high water table, a sandy type material, and when an earthquake occurs, he's right, the property sinks. It's like when you go to the beach and you stand in the hard sand just that's wet and the water comes in and you kind of go down, that's a liquefiable. That's what you feel with liquefaction. And the properties may sustain more damage if they're close or in the path of an earthquake. So that's the way that works. As far as the flood zones go, the way they base that with the torrential flooding, or if there's a dam that's full capacity and earthquake occurs, that there's at least a 1% chance of 1 foot of water being on that property. That's how they determine whether or not it's in a flood zone. And there's from the Prado Dam, there's one that runs all the way from the dam all the way out to the Long Beach Harbor. So they do fan out and they are sizable. The way we handle it is, yes, we report based on the parcel, but our vice president is a land surveyor. So if that does occur, he can go out to the property and do a flood elevation certificate, which actually tells the insurance company, hey, this property's 5 feet above the flood zone, so you don't have to pay additional flood insurance. Instead, you pay for the report $400 and not $1,200 additional per year, because it is. The next thing I want to talk about is the difference between, because we're not in Missouri, the show me state, we're in California, the sue me state, right? You've heard it?
Yeah.
You have to have local information also. And a lot of the areas, some of them, I'm going to give you an example because we have limited time. The tsunami zone. Have you ever driven up the coast and noticed, hey, there's these tsunamis, you're in a tsunami zone. What does that mean? That means if there's an earthquake out in the middle of the sea, water and a wave could come and hit that area and destroy homes and the whole area over there. So that's one of the areas. Another one is they have difference in the flood zones. They have difference in the liquefiable zones. The reason is that the state does not have the funding to send people out to update their information on a regular basis, but the county city pay their officials to make sure that these are updated. The fire, the flood, all these different zones. Another one is the ultramorphic rock, which is the asbestos rock. A lot of those, there's only one county that has it, and it's up in El Dorado County, north of Sacramento. And there, we have to do it in there because it does have, and the county and the city require it, that you do have to report that it is in a ultramorphic rock and there is natural occurring asbestos. So, I mean, you have to have the local as well as just the state. Other things you have to have, and this came in last year, was the notice of mining operations, okay? The biggest, there are over 700 of them in the state. They go up and down the mountains, and it's not like digging in for gold or minerals and things. It's just strip mining, taking the gravel and things so they can make cement and other things. So they're all over the place. One of the main areas, if you go up the 405 freeway and up to the 5, just before you leave the Sylmar area, to the right of the water table coming down, that is a mining area, strip mining area. And they're supposed to check into the environmental aspects and things like that of the cause of when you do take the minerals and how's that going to affect the area and whatnot. But over a period of time, it's going to change the topography, and then also there may be cause for when it starts raining, you're going to have floods, mud flow, all kinds of things that could be a problem. Another expansive soils. When you're up, it's not so big down here, but when you're up north, there's frozen soil, okay? So it contracts. When it gets hot, it expands. So when it expands, it could affect the house there, and maybe you'll have some buckling in the structure. So you've got to have both of those things. Another, right to farm. Right to farm came into effect, and a lot of these come into because of lawsuits. People moving from the city up to the Bakersfield area or whatnot, and they're maybe not there the day when they're doing the harvesting or the fertilizing or spraying for pesticides. So they don't get that kind of effect. So the day they move in, boom, they start doing that. They want to sue, they can't. It's going to be in the report, in or not within a mile of a right to farm. San Francisco Bay Conservation, that's only up north. We'll tell you if you're in it, if you're dealing with properties. We do all of California. Airport influence area. It's either a mapped area for a large airport, or for a smaller airport, it's a 2-mile statutory radius around the property. The airport noise disclosure, it's not all bad. If the people really like to live in that property and they're in the 65 decibel noise zone, they can apply to the federal authority to get federal funding to help soundproof their homes. So if they really want to live there. And if it's in the airport influence, it's going to be in the airport noise, but not the other way around. Radon zone, radon's come back with the vengeance. There are many areas in LA County, including Long Beach and some areas, will report what the level is in the radon. It's not to scare you, it's just to let you know that over a period of time, if you stay in that area and you don't provide the right ventilation, you may sustain respiratory or get cancer, diseases.
Yeah, but keep in mind on the radon zone, radons are done by county. So all the county of Los Angeles is in the same radon zone. All the county of San Diego is in the same radon zone. And it's at the medium level in Los Angeles, same as San Diego. The two upper ones here, I think, are Ventura and Santa Barbara. But remember, and if you look on the MyNHD website, we have a map of the United States, a map of California showing you all the county zones. I remember we had an issue about that a while ago where a guy was moving from Redondo Beach to Redondo Beach from Torrance. And his issue was, I'm buying a house in a radon zone. And I said, well, it's the same radon zone, that you have in Torrance. And his, yeah, but I'm a smoker. I said, well, that's a whole other issue. So, it's the same for the county. It's just a county disclosure. So it's not meant to scare anybody. Radon comes from the seeping of the rocks that have been decaying over 10,000 years, and it's just an element out there. It's not to be, scared of. We don't want to scare anybody into buying a house because it's the same for the whole county. Everybody has it.
Remember, the key here is surprises cause lawsuits. Get the information at the time of listing, and it is important to have the local information. The last one is commercial industrial zone. You must stay with it if it's within a mile of that. Quickly, we're going to go through the disclosure, advisory disclosures. Mold is in every home. If you don't clean out the bathtub, it's that grayish material that grows in there. You got to use Tilex. It's not a simple cleanup. You may have to actually remove, really dig in there and remove the stuff because it doesn't. Ed McMahon is a great example of that. Ed McMahon had that home. It was leaking. They did the repair, but they didn't do the cleanup. His dog died and his family was ill, and they had to move into a hotel. They resolved that.
He is now, too.
Remember that?
Yeah.
What?
He's now.
Yeah, exactly. See, so
Still has the mold.
maybe it did affect him. Maybe it did affect him. Quickly, the sex offender, Megan's Law, you're not to look that up. We have in there in our report the phone number for the local authorities and the website for Northern and Southern California. Methamphetamine, advisory. You must state yes or no if the property's been in a meth lab and closed down for being in a meth lab. They have to go in there with special suits on because of the stuff they cut it with. It's very toxic. You have to disclose that. If you don't, and you still have to rely on the seller's knowledge, and it comes back that he's lying about it, it's up to a year in jail and maybe and a $5,000 fine. The oil and gas well advisors we have in our report. It tells you that there are gas wells and oil wells that are out there. To get more information, contact our office. And
all of the...
High
all-
pressure, yeah.
Right, well, and all the products, all the local disclosures that John has mentioned, they're in both reports. We both do them, we both do them well. They're in all the reports, and they're required disclosures, and we all disclose them. The newest one that's coming up July 1st, that's a requirement, and that's the latest one, of course, last John mentioned, was the mining operation. The newest one is the gas pipeline disclosure notice. And that is, in fact, just a notice that needs to be disclosed. We all remember what happened in San Bruno when there was an explosion and people got killed in the houses. It was just a mess just south of San Francisco. But now it's a notice that'll be in the reports, and actually it's in our reports already as of today, so you report your order, but the requirement is after July 1st, 2013, that a notice be in there letting them know that the liquid notice regarding gas and hazardous liquid transmission pipelines. There may be pipelines near the property, there may be, and people can look it up, and there's a website link on there where people can look up if there is a pipe near the property or not. That's what it is. Now, in the environmental report that we offer, we go that step further, and we tell you, yes or no, is there a major pipeline near the property as well. But in our regular report, we're doing the actual notice that's required by Civil Code, and that's what we do. You want to add anything to that pipeline?
Yes, if you're dealing with someone that reads the reports, you're dealing with a doctor, an engineer, or whatnot, and getting the environmental report we charge $30, actually we call it the premium. It not only gives you the pipeline and the location in a map form and writes it out whether or not it's within 2,000 feet of a natural gas pipeline, but it also gives you the location of abandoned wells, oil wells, the abandoned mines. It gives you the location of underground contaminated sources and many other things.
Storage tanks built underground.
Yeah, and these things are very important because especially if you're dealing in an area where it's heavily industrial, you may be closer to underground contaminated sources. Oh, she's raising her hand? Okay, nice, honesty, I love it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's do that. Okay, so those are the things that are good to get. The whole thing is order at time of listing, use it to market. If it doesn't close, let us know. When you're ready to move to escrow, we'll move it to escrow for you. You got to have the local information in there and the full tax, and we will make sure that you get it taken care of. We have other people on staff to do land survey. We have due diligence, and anything dealing with land, I can take care of for you.
Question.
Yeah, let's
Yes.
ask some questions.
So you have high